What happens when a galactic oracle built to calculate the exact second every species finally gives up, asks one human how long she can endure, and the answer is not a number. For 3 centuries, the surrender engine had ended wars before they began. It had predicted when fortress worlds would kneel, when admirals would abandon fleets, when kings would trade their crowns for one more breath. It had never been wrong. Then, on evaluation cycle 91, Technician Mara Venn placed her palm on the silver plate, looked into the machine that had broken emperors, and smiled. The engine did not print a probability. It did not print a weakness. It did not print a survival threshold. Across the observation dome, every screen went black. Then, one by one, the monitors returned with a single phrase repeating in every known language of the Accord. No terminal surrender condition found. The chamber beneath the Concordance War College was older than the moon around it. It had been carved into the basalt skeleton of Ilir Station back when the Accord still believed peace could be achieved by making every intelligent species understand the price of war. The room was vast, circular, and silent, built around a vertical column of liquid light that descended from the ceiling into a glass basin in the floor. Around that column floated 12 rings of pale metal, each covered in microscopic inscriptions from civilizations that no longer existed. At the center of it all stood the surrender engine. It was not a weapon, at least not officially. It did not burn cities or shatter fleets. It simply asked one question. At what point will you stop resisting? Every species had an answer. Every commander, monarch, soldier, revolutionary, and saint who had ever been tested eventually reached a point where the mind accepted the inevitable. Pain, isolation, starvation, betrayal, extinction, disgrace, helplessness, the death of offspring, the collapse of belief. The engine did not frighten its subjects. Fear was crude. Fear could be endured. The engine showed certainty. It simulated defeat so total that the subject's nervous system stopped pretending hope had meaning. That was why the Concordance War College still used it. Before any officer could command lives, they had to know the place where their own will ended. Admiral Sovan Threx stood behind the transparent shield of the observation gallery with his arms folded behind his back. His skin was the deep cobalt of the Threxian coastal clans, marked with ritual scars that shimmered faintly beneath the chamber lights. He had commanded 3 defensive wars, survived 2 assassination attempts, and once ordered the evacuation of an entire colony, while enemy missiles were already entering atmosphere. He believed in discipline. He believed in measured courage. He did not believe in exceptions. Beside him, archivist Elia Moore stood at a crescent-shaped console, her long silver fingers moving through curtains of holographic data. She was Vaethari, a species whose emotions manifested as faint bioluminescent pulses along the throat. At that moment, her light was calm blue, professional and steady. "Next candidate," Admiral Sovan said. Elia checked the roster. Cadet Rule Sen of the Kar Dominion. "Proceed." The inner doors opened with a sound like stone grinding under deep water. Rule Sen entered without hesitation. He was massive, even by Kar standards, nearly 8 feet tall, his 4 shoulders layered beneath braided armor mesh. The Kar had once conquered 6 neighboring systems, with nothing but disciplined infantry and starvation logistics. Their children were trained to sleep standing. Their officers were famous for refusing anesthesia during surgery because pain was considered a private inconvenience. Rule approached the surrender engine like a man approaching a throne he planned to inherit. "Candidate," Archivist Elia said through the chamber speaker. "Place both hands upon the induction plates." Rule obeyed. 2 silver panels rose from the floor and pressed against his palms. Thin threads of light crawled up his arms, mapped his nervous system, and entered the base of his skull through non-invasive quantum resonance. The 12 rings around the central column began to rotate. "Baseline stable," Elia said. "Cortisol equivalent low, heart pressure strong, resistance confidence unusually high." Admiral Sovan's expression did not change. "They are always confident before the engine speaks." The column of liquid light brightened. Rule's jaw clenched. For several seconds, nothing else happened. Then the giant car inhaled sharply. His pupils widened until his golden eyes were almost black. The muscles in his neck rose like cables. His armored fingers dug into the induction plates hard enough to bend the edges. The engine was not showing him monsters. It was not showing him death. It was showing him the inevitable defeat of the one idea his species could not survive losing. Scenario identified, Elia said softly. Command collapse through dishonor cascade. He is witnessing his warband surrender under his banner, while his ancestral line records him as the first coward in 8 generations. Ruel made a sound that did not belong in a soldier's throat. It was not a scream. It was smaller, more broken. The massive cadet sank to one knee. The induction plates followed him down, still glowing against his palms. His body was intact. His mind was not. Tears ran down the hard plates of his face as his breathing turned ragged and uneven. Yield threshold reached, Elia reported. Time to surrender acceptance, 79 seconds. Admiral Sovan nodded once. End simulation. The engine dimmed. Ruel collapsed forward, catching himself on all 4 hands, trembling violently. Medical aides entered the chamber and guided him out. He would recover. Most did. Some even became better officers after learning the shape of their breaking point. But they all had one. Elia saved the data file and exhaled. The car remained predictable under shame-based surrender architecture. All species are predictable under sufficient pressure, Sovan said. That is the point. Elia's fingers paused above the roster. The blue glow along her throat flickered green with curiosity. Next candidate is unusual. Sovan glanced at her. Name: Mara Venn, human, provisional technical exchange placement. The Admiral's eyes narrowed slightly. Humans were still new to the Accord. Officially, they were classified as a mid-tier emerging species from a high-adversity biosphere. Unofficially, the faculty had argued about them for 6 months. They were physically unimpressive by most military standards. No natural armor, no venom, no collective memory, no redundant lungs, no sensory organs beyond the basic range. Yet every report from joint training contained the same contradiction. Humans performed poorly under ideal conditions and alarmingly well under catastrophic ones. They complained constantly, improvised recklessly, formed emotional attachments too quickly, broke procedural rules under pressure, and somehow kept turning failed exercises into victories that no simulation predicted. Sovan disliked variables that laughed. "Send her in," he said. "Let us see where Earth ends." The doors opened again. Mara Venn walked into the chamber carrying a maintenance tablet under one arm. She was smaller than most of the candidates that morning, with dark curls tied messily behind her head and a gray technician's jacket that had clearly been washed too many times. She did not have the polished bearing of a command cadet. She moved like someone who knew the building from the service corridors rather than the ceremonial entrances. She glanced up at the rotating rings of the engine. "Wow," she said. "That is deeply unsettling." Archivist Elia blinked. "Candidate Venn, this is a formal evaluation." Mara looked toward the observation shield. "Sorry. Respectfully deeply unsettling." Admiral Sovan's mouth tightened. "You understand the function of the surrender engine?" "It calculates the point where I stop resisting," Mara replied. "It simulates hopelessness until my brain signs the emotional paperwork." "That is an undignified description. Does that make it wrong?" For the first time that morning, Elia's throat light flashed amused violet before she quickly suppressed it. Sovan leaned toward the speaker. "Place your hands on the induction plates, Technician Venn." "Technician, not cadet," Mara said, stepping onto the central platform. "I maintain atmosphere scrubbers and teach your food printers not to turn coffee into soup. I'm only here because someone in admissions thought humans needed a psychological risk profile before we're allowed near command systems." "You object?" "No, Admiral. I'm just establishing that if this thing melts my brain, I would like my job title recorded accurately." "Proceed." Mara set her tablet carefully on the floor, rolled her shoulders, and placed her palms on the plates. The light climbed her arms. Elia's console filled with data. Baseline heart rate slightly elevated, she said. Adrenaline markers present. She is nervous. I'm standing inside a moon basement touching an ancient surrender calculator, Mara said. Nervous seems reasonable. Silence during induction, Sovan ordered. Mara closed her mouth. The 12 rings began to rotate faster. The central column brightened, and the liquid light inside turned from white to a deep and bottomless gray. The first layer of the engine entered her mind. It did not attack. It reasoned. It calculated the most efficient route to surrender based on memory, instinct, social conditioning, pain tolerance, and existential priority. It searched for the emotional pillar that held Mara Venn upright. Then it applied weight. Initial scenario forming, Elia said. Personal abandonment under resource exhaustion. She is isolated in a failing vessel. Oxygen limited. Rescue probability mathematically 0. Inside the chamber, Mara's fingers twitched. Her breathing changed. The engine made her feel the cold metal floor of a dead ship beneath her cheek. It made her hear alarms dying one by one as batteries failed. It gave her a cracked visor, a bleeding leg, no radio, no engines, and enough oxygen for 11 minutes. It gave her the certainty that nobody was coming. Her heart rate rose. Sovan watched closely. There, he said. Isolation pressure works quickly on social species. Mara swallowed. Then her breathing steadied. Not relaxed. Steady. Elia frowned. Unexpected cortical shift. Explain. She is not accepting the premise. The engine controls the premise. Yes, Elia said, leaning closer to the console. But her cognition is generating tasks. She is inventorying tools, mapping the vessel, calculating oxygen consumption, searching for ways to convert coolant tubing into a pressure seal. Sovan's eyes hardened. Increase compression. The second layer engaged. The room temperature seemed to fall, though the physical environment remained unchanged. The column of light pulsed once, and the engine removed the possibility of practical solutions. No tools, no radio, no door, no unknown variable to exploit. Only failure. Mara's jaw tightened. Scenario modification, Elia whispered. She is now witnessing the loss of dependent lives. Children in a sealed habitat. She has insufficient oxygen to save them all. Mara's shoulders curled inward. For a moment the human looked very young. Her eyes squeezed shut. Her lips moved without sound. The biometric readings spiked hard enough to turn 3 monitors amber. Her pain response was intense, immediate, and unmistakable. Yield developing, Sovan said, but the surrender marker did not appear. Instead, the console produced a line Elia had never seen during a standard evaluation. Resistance vector multiplying. That cannot be right, she murmured. Mara began counting under her breath. Sovan leaned closer to the shield. What is she saying? Elia isolated the audio. Mara whispered, 1 trip for the small ones. Break the hinge, strip the wall panel. Carry 2 at a time. Breathe shallow. Don't waste motion. Don't waste motion. Don't waste motion. Elia's throat light shifted from blue to pale gold. She is still trying. The scenario has no solution. Her nervous system does not appear to accept that as relevant. Sovan's voice sharpened. 3rd layer. Elia looked at him. Admiral, 3rd layer is used for command officers with full consent. She is a technician. She volunteered for accord placement. Engage 3rd layer. Elia hesitated. Then she touched the control. The chamber went silent. Not quieter. Silent. The kind of silence that seems to press its hands over the mouth of the universe. The surrender engine descended past fear, past grief, past pain, and found something deeper. It built a future in Mara's mind where Earth had been judged unfit for defense. It showed accord fleets withdrawing. It showed human colonies cut off. It showed messages unanswered, treaties voided, allies apologizing as they left. Then it showed Earth's sky burning, not quickly, not mercifully. It gave Mara years of decline in seconds, crops failing under ash clouds, hospitals without power, parents lying to children about rescue, oceans turning black, cities going quiet one neighborhood at a time. It showed humanity not conquered in a glorious battle, but abandoned to attrition, paperwork, and someone else's strategic convenience. Mara screamed. The sound tore through the chamber, raw and human and terrible. Her knees buckled, but the induction plates held her upright. Blood vessels burst in one eye. Every monitor in the observation gallery flared red. "End it," Elia said. "She is exceeding safe neural load." "Wait," Sovan said, though his voice had lost some of its certainty. The engine pressed harder. It removed revenge. It removed rescue. It removed victory. It showed Mara the final human settlement beneath a red sky with no medicine, no ships, no hope, and one generator left. Then it asked her the question it had asked kings and generals and saints. At what point do you stop resisting? Mara's scream ended. Her head lifted. Her eyes opened. Her face was wet with tears, but something behind those tears had changed. The engine's rings began to shake. Elia stared at the primary readout. "Admiral." "What?" "It has no surrender acceptance. That is impossible. The engine is increasing certainty pressure. 97%, 99, full inevitability lock." Inside the chamber, Mara's hands closed around the induction plates. The metal groaned. She whispered one sentence. The audio barely caught it. "Then we make the last generator count." Every screen in the observation gallery went black. The column of light flashed white. The 12 rings stopped rotating at once. Elia's console screamed with cascading errors as the engine tried to reconcile total defeat with continued resistance and found no category for it. The machine had been built on the premise that sentient organisms surrendered when survival became mathematically impossible. But Mara's mind had not remained inside mathematics. It had moved somewhere older, somewhere colder, somewhere beneath reason. The induction plates cracked. Sovan stepped back from the shield. In the chamber, Mara was still crying, still shaking, still terrified beyond anything most species could survive. But she was not surrendering. Her nervous system had done something the engine had never been asked to measure. It had turned hopelessness into duty. It had taken the absence of rescue and converted it into responsibility. The central column ruptured. Liquid light poured upward instead of down, striking the ceiling in a silent explosion of white sparks. The rings spun wildly, then locked into place one by one with violent metallic cracks. The entire chamber dimmed. On the main display, a single sentence appeared. "No terminal surrender condition found." Then the surrender engine shut itself down. Mara woke in a decontamination room with a splitting headache and a blanket around her shoulders. Someone had placed a warm cup in her hands. She did not remember receiving it. Steam rose from the surface, carrying a smell that was almost coffee if a machine had read about coffee in a hostile courtroom. Her right palm was bandaged. Her throat felt scraped raw. Every muscle ached like she had spent the afternoon fighting gravity and losing. Across the table sat Admiral Sovan Threx. Archivist Elia Moore stood behind him with a medical scanner in one hand and an expression Mara could not read. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Mara looked down at the cup. "Did I fail?" Sovan's eyes narrowed. "You broke an irreplaceable strategic assessment relic that has guided a core doctrine for 300 years. Mara considered that. "So, not a clean pass." Elia made a soft sound that might have been a laugh trying very hard not to exist. Sovan did not look amused. He placed a thin crystal file on the table. It lit from within, projecting Mara's biometric data in sharp blue lines. "What did you do inside the engine?" Mara blinked. "Suffered? You resisted full inevitability compression." "I did not know that was an option." "It is not." "Then I did it accidentally." The Admiral leaned forward. "Do not mistake this moment for leniency, Technician. That device has ended conflicts without bloodshed for centuries. It works because it understands surrender. It understood the car. It understood the Vathari. It understood my species before we ever joined the Accord. It has evaluated warlords, pacifists, tyrants, monks, insurgents, and machines capable of writing their own souls. Then you touched it, and it declared you had no endpoint. Mara looked at the projection. The phrase repeated in several lines of diagnostic text. No terminal surrender condition found. That sounds unhealthy, she said quietly. Ilya stepped closer. It may be more precise to say the engine could not locate a condition where surrender became internally acceptable to you. Everyone surrenders eventually, Sovan said. Mara's fingers tightened around the warm cup. No, she said. The room changed after that word. It was not loud. It was not defiant. It was simply certain. Sovan studied her. Explain. Mara stared into the almost coffee. People stop. Bodies stop. Armies run out of ammunition. Ships lose air. Cities fall. You can kill someone. You can trap them. You can break every tool they have. She looked up. But surrender is different. Surrender is when some part of you agrees that resistance has no meaning. Humans are very bad at that part. Elya's throat light glowed soft amber. Why? For Mara's laugh was small and tired. Because Earth spent most of its history trying to kill us, and then we helped. Ice ages, plagues, famines, wars, storms, predators, bad kings, bad maps, bad ideas. We kept ending up in situations where the smart answer was to lie down and become a fossil. And yet somebody always made soup. Somebody always carried water. Somebody always hid a book in a wall. Somebody always planted seeds in dirt that probably wouldn't grow. Somebody always sang to a baby during a bombardment. Somebody always fixed the last generator. Sovan's gaze did not soften, but something in it shifted. The engine showed you Earth dying. Yes. And your response was maintenance. Mara looked down at her bandaged hands. My response was that if there was one generator left, someone had to keep it running. Ilya's fingers moved across the scanner. Admiral, her stress readings remain elevated. She is telling the truth as she understands it. Sovan tapped the crystal file. Your background says you were raised in the belt salvage communes. Mara became still. Ilya noticed immediately. Sovan did too. Your file is unusually sparse, he continued. Parents deceased in a decompression accident. Apprenticeship under Orbital Salvage Guild. Accepted into a court exchange as environmental systems specialist. No military record. No command training. No psychological exception markers. That's all accurate. It is incomplete. Mara took a slow breath. Most files are. The Admiral's voice lowered. What is the Lantern Archive? Ilya turned her head sharply toward him. Admiral? Mara's face lost all expression. For the first time since entering the evaluation chamber, she looked afraid in a way that had nothing to do with machines. Sovan watched that fear arrive and understood he had found the correct door. The phrase appears in a sealed cultural inheritance note attached to your medical consent forms, he said. It required command clearance to open. I opened it. Mara set the cup down very carefully. The Lantern Archive is private. This is an Accord security matter. No, Mara said. It's a human grief matter. That means you're standing on thin ice, Admiral. Sovan's scars shimmered faintly. Are you threatening me? I'm warning you that some things look like weapons, only because you've never seen a family album from a species that nearly died more times than it can count. The silence after that was heavy. Ilya broke it gently. What is it, Mara? Mara did not answer immediately. When she did, her voice was quiet. During the evacuation era, before Earth had stable interstellar protection, every long-haul human colony ship carried a Lantern Archive. Not tactical plans, not state secrets, letters, recipes, repair manuals, funeral songs, medical improvisations, stories of disasters survived and disasters not survived, last messages from people who knew they would not make it but wanted someone after them to know what happened. Sovan frowned. Why attach that to children? Because adults die, Mara said. Systems fail. Governments collapse. Databases corrupt. But a child who knows the story can carry it into the next room. The salvage communes kept the archive alive because we lived inside wreckage. Every broken ship had voices in it. Every sealed door had someone behind it once. We were taught to listen, learn, and keep the lights on for whoever came next. Elya's throat light dimmed with sorrow. Mara looked back at the diagnostic projection. "The engine thought it was showing me the end," she said. "But humans have a lot of practice receiving last messages. We don't hear them as permission to stop. We hear them as instructions." Before Sovan could answer, the room lights flickered. Once, twice. Then the emergency sirens began. Not the soft warning tones of a drill, the real alarm. A harsh descending wail that made every wall vibrate. Elya's console flashed red. "External breach," she said. "Docking spine 7. Unauthorized boarding signatures." Sovan was already on his feet. "Security team status." Elya's hands moved rapidly. "Unresponsive. Local network disruption. Something is corrupting command channels." The door's security panel sparked. A voice came through the station-wide speakers, smooth and layered, like a choir speaking through one mouth. "People of Iller Station, remain calm. Your resistance has already been measured. Your survival is no longer cost-effective." Sovan's face hardened. Mara looked up slowly. Elya whispered, "The Hush Covenant." The name drained the warmth from the room. Even Mara knew it. Everyone in Accord space knew it. The Hush Covenant did not conquer worlds in the traditional sense. They arrived after disasters, during civil wars, after famines, in the quiet hour when a civilization was exhausted. They offered peace, food, order, silence. Then they took the children for harmonization, erased local histories, and turned entire populations into obedient labor choirs that sang while they dismantled their own cities. They did not attack strongholds. They waited for surrender. Sovan drew his sidearm. "They should not be within 6 sectors of this moon." Elya's console flashed again. "They are not alone. I am reading Accord transponder codes among the boarding craft. Traitors. Or captured ships." The speaker voice returned. "Command faculty, surrender your strategic archives and remain in place. Students will be processed humanely. Non-compliance will result in oxygen discipline." Mara stood up. The blanket fell from her shoulders. Sovan looked at her. "You are injured. Stay here." "My maintenance tablet is still in the engine chamber." "This is not a repair problem." The station shuddered. Somewhere far below, something exploded hard enough to send dust from the ceiling. Elya's throat light flashed fear-white. "They have severed the lower habitation ring. Cadets are trapped in the east dormitories. Life support is falling." Mara's eyes sharpened. "How many?" 212 students. 30 faculty. Oxygen loss in 11 minutes if the Covenant keeps control of the valves." Sovan moved toward the door. "I need to reach command." "You won't," Mara said. He turned. She walked past him to the wall panel, ripped it open with her bandaged hand, and stared into the cables. 5. "The central command lines are the obvious target," she said. "The Hush Covenant studies surrender infrastructure. They'll control elevators, seals, alarms, oxygen, and official weapons lockers. They want everyone watching the big doors while the air disappears." Elya looked at her. "How do you know that?" Mara pulled 2 wires free with her teeth and twisted them together. The lights in the room flickered from red to dim amber. "Because people who want surrender always start by making you feel alone." A hidden service hatch clicked open behind the medical cabinet. Sovan stared. "That is not on station schematics." "No," Mara said, picking up a discarded tool belt from a supply shelf. "It's on maintenance schematics." The service crawlspace smelled of dust, hot circuitry, and old insulation. Mara moved first, dragging herself through the narrow passage with practiced speed despite the pain in her palm. Behind her, Admiral Sovan followed with difficulty, his broader frame scraping the walls. Elya came last, carrying a portable command slate patched into a dying emergency network. The sirens were muffled in the crawlspace, but the voice of the Hush Covenant still seeped through the walls. "Panic is inefficient. Resistance will reduce survival allocation. Please remain seated." Mara muttered, I hate them already. Sovan's voice came from behind her. You have experience with hostile boardings? I have experience with old stations pretending they're safer than they are. That is not the same. It is when the station is losing air. Elya's slate chimed. Mara, the east dormitory bulkheads have sealed, but internal pressure is dropping faster. They are venting from maintenance sub-level C. Of course they are. Can you stop it? Not from here. Sovan's tone sharpened. Then where? Mara reached a junction, kicked a rusted latch, and dropped through a vertical shaft onto a narrow catwalk above a roaring ventilation chamber. Huge atmospheric turbines spun below them, each blade the size of a shuttle wing. Red hazard lights pulsed across the machinery. She pointed across the chamber. That manifold controls emergency air routing to the east ring. If I can manually jam it open, the dorms get oxygen from the agricultural reserve tanks. Elya scanned the distance. The access bridge is retracted. Mara looked down at the turbine pit. Sovan followed her gaze. No, I didn't say anything. You thought something reckless. I thought something necessary. The chamber door on the far side burst open before Sovan could respond. 3 figures entered wearing pale segmented armor that moved like bone under skin. Hush Covenant silencers. They were tall, narrow, and almost delicate, their faces hidden behind smooth masks with no visible eyes. Each carried a compression lance designed not to kill loudly, but to fold internal organs with invisible pulses. One of them turned toward the catwalk, its mask tilted. Unprocessed movement detected. Sovan raised his sidearm and fired. The bolt struck the silencer in the chest. Its armor absorbed the energy in a ripple of milky light. Accord weapons are indexed, Mara snapped. They adapted before boarding. The silencers raised their lances. Mara grabbed a red maintenance lever and pulled with both hands. Nothing happened. She swore, planted one boot against the railing, and threw her full weight backward. The levers snapped down. Below them, one of the atmospheric turbines reversed direction. The chamber became a hurricane. The silencers staggered as the air pressure shifted violently. Sovan braced himself against the catwalk railing. Elya cried out as her command slate nearly flew from her hands. Mara unclipped a coil of emergency tether from the wall. "What are you doing?" Sovan shouted over the wind. "Crossing! There is no bridge! Then I won't use one!" Before he could stop her, Mara clipped one end of the tether to the catwalk, wrapped the other around her waist, climbed onto the railing, and jumped. For one impossible second, she vanished into the roar. The reverse turbine threw her sideways instead of down. She slammed into a hanging maintenance chain, caught it with both arms, and swung across the open chamber as compression pulses cracked through the air behind her. One pulse struck the chain above her hand. Metal screamed. Mara dropped, hit the far platform hard, rolled badly, and struck the wall shoulder first. Pain flashed white behind her eyes. She did not stop. The first silencer turned toward her. Sovan fired again, not at the armor this time, but at the floor beneath the alien's feet. The catwalk plate superheated and buckled. The silencer stumbled. Elya, breathing hard, looked at the turbine controls on her side. She understood suddenly and slammed both hands onto the secondary override. The turbine reversed again. The hurricane changed direction. The 3 silencers were lifted off their feet and hurled toward the spinning intake guard. 2 struck the mesh and shattered like ceramic dolls. The third caught the edge with one hand, its mask turning toward Mara with cold intent. Mara reached the manifold wheel. It was locked. "Of course!" she gasped. The surviving silencer pulled itself onto her platform. Its compression lance unfolded. Mara searched the tool belt with shaking hands and found a plasma cutter no longer than her thumb. The charge indicator showed 7%. The silencer moved closer. Across the chamber, Sovan shouted something she could not hear. Mara jammed the cutter into the manifold lock and activated it. The beam sputtered. The lock glowed. The silencer raised its lance. "Resistance reduces allocation," it said. Mara looked at the faceless thing. "So does bad maintenance." The lock snapped. She spun the wheel. The manifold opened with a thunderclap. Thousands of liters of compressed oxygen surged through the emergency pipes toward the east dormitories. The pressure wave blew the silencer backward. It struck the railing, tipped over, and fell silently into the turbine pit below. Elia's slate lit green. "Oxygen restored to East Ring," she called. "Cadets stabilizing." Mara leaned against the manifold, breathing hard. For 3 seconds, there was victory. Then the entire station went dark. Not emergency dark. Absolute dark. The turbine stopped. The siren stopped. The Covenant voice stopped. Every light in the ventilation chamber died, leaving only the faint glow of Elia's throat and the red heat of Mara's ruined cutter. Sovan whispered, "What did they do?" Elia's slate rebooted in her hands. When it came back, her face changed. "They did not come for the archives," she said. "That was a diversion." Mara looked across the black chamber. "Then what did they come for?" Elia swallowed. "The surrender engine." The Hush Covenant had found the broken oracle. By the time Mara, Sovan, and Elia reached the old evaluation chamber, the doors had already been cut open from the outside. The chamber that had felt sacred an hour earlier now looked violated. Smoke drifted through the circular room. The 12 rings of the surrender engine hung motionless and dark, half of them cracked from Mara's impossible evaluation. Around the central column, Covenant technicians moved with precise and silent efficiency, attaching pale cables to the damaged core. At their center stood a figure in robes of layered white fabric. Unlike the silencers, this one wore no mask. Its face was narrow and smooth, with translucent skin stretched over delicate bones. Its eyes were enormous, black and wet, reflecting every light in the room. Elia's throat dimmed almost to gray. "Cantor Viel." Sovan's sidearm rose. "Leader of the Covenant Expeditionary Choir." The cantor turned before Sovan stepped fully into the chamber, as if it had been expecting him. "Admiral Threx," it said, voice gentle. "Your resistance profile is documented. You will endure threats to yourself, moderate loss of command authority, and up to 43% casualty projection before surrender becomes strategically acceptable. Beyond that point, you preserve institutional continuity over individual defiance." Sovan's scars brightened with anger. "You know nothing about me. I know enough to help you stop suffering." Mara stayed half behind the broken door frame, eyes moving through the chamber. 6 silencers, 4 technicians, 1 cantor. The engine core exposed, the induction plates cracked but still connected. No official weapons would work reliably against their armor. Her gaze dropped to the service conduits under the floor. Old station, old pipes, old mistakes. Cantor Viel looked toward her. The black eyes widened slightly. "And there is the human." Mara stepped into the chamber. She carried no weapon except a wrench, a dead plasma cutter, and a coil of emergency wire around her shoulder. The cantor studied her the way a surgeon might study an unexpected tumor. "You damaged the oracle. It started it. You forced a contradiction into a sacred instrument. Your sacred instrument asked a stupid question." Sovan hissed, "Venn," but Viel lifted one delicate hand. "No, let her speak. Her mind left an absence in the engine. We heard it from orbit. A silence where surrender should have been." The cantor's voice softened. "Tell me, human, what are you?" "Tired." "That is not an answer. It's the most honest one you're getting." Viel moved closer to the broken central column. "The Accord used this device to predict surrender. Primitive, narrow. We will improve it. Connect it to the Hush Array. Broadcast inevitability across every contested world. No more sieges. No more insurgencies. No more wasted resistance. Every species will hear the exact mathematical proof that struggle is meaningless, and they will lay down their weapons before the first city burns." Elia whispered, "You would turn it into a mass surrender weapon." Viel's black eyes remained on Mara. A mercy. Mara felt cold, not from fear of death, from recognition. The engine had shown her people abandoned by allies, crushed by certainty, slowly convinced that no one was coming. The Covenant wanted to make that feeling contagious. "How many worlds?" Mara asked. Viel's expression did not change. "At first, 12. At first. Peace spreads." "No," Mara said. "Mold spreads. Peace has to be built. One of the Covenant technicians chirped in a language Mara's translator rendered as alarm. Vielle turned. Core alignment at 60%, the technician said. Oracle fracture remains, but the human anomaly can be isolated. Vielle looked back at Mara. Can it? The question was soft. The chamber doors behind Mara slammed shut. Sovan fired instantly, striking one silencer's knee joint. Its armor absorbed most of the shot, but the force staggered it. Ilya dove behind a console as compression pulses sliced through the air. Mara moved in the opposite direction. Not away from danger, under it. She dropped flat as a pulse passed over her head and rolled beneath the nearest induction plate. The plate's underside still glowed faintly from residual charge. She jammed the dead plasma cutter into an exposed maintenance seam and twisted. The plate came loose. A silencer stepped toward her. Mara grabbed the emergency wire from her shoulder, hooked one end around the exposed conductor beneath the plate, and threw the coil at the silencer's ankles. "Admiral!" she shouted. Sovan understood half a second too late but fired anyway. His energy bolt struck the induction plate. The residual charge jumped into the wire wrapped around the silencer's legs and discharged through its armor. The alien convulsed, dropped its lance and collapsed smoking to the floor. Mara snatched the lance. It was too long, too light, and designed for a body with different joints. She hated it immediately. A second silencer lunged. Mara did not try to fence. She threw the lance like a spear. It struck the silencer in the face mask and detonated with a dull, implosive pop. The alien fell backward, its helmet folded inward. Vielle watched, fascinated. "You are frightened," the cantor said. Mara ducked behind the cracked central basin as compression pulses shattered the stone above her. "Yes." "Yet you continue." "Yes." "Why?" Mara grabbed a shard of broken ring metal from the floor. Its edge was sharp enough to cut her fingers through the bandage. "Because you keep standing between me and the off switch." The next minutes became chaos. Sovan fought like the old war commander he was, disciplined and brutal, using every fragment of cover as if he had memorized the room in a previous life. Ilya, who had never been trained for close combat, weaponized the chamber itself. She overrode gravity in localized bursts, making two Covenant technicians slam into the ceiling before dropping them unconscious onto the floor. Mara crawled through maintenance seams, yanked cooling lines, cut sensor cables, and turned the sacred ancient oracle into a very expensive electrical hazard. But the Covenant had not survived centuries by being fragile. For every silencer that fell, another sealed a door. For every cable Mara cut, a technician rerouted the connection. The hush array link continued to climb. 70%, 78, 84. Then Cantor Vielle stopped watching. It raised both hands and sang. The sound was not loud. It was barely a melody. But it moved through Mara's bones and found every exhausted place inside her. It carried warmth, rest, permission. It told her she had done enough. It told her nobody would blame her if she stopped now. It told her the fight was too large, the enemy too prepared, the station too compromised, the galaxy too cold. Across the chamber, Sovan dropped to one knee. Ilya gripped her console, trembling. Mara's wrench slipped from her hand. Vielle's voice entered the station speakers. All across Ilir Station, cadets trapped behind sealed doors heard the song. Faculty defending corridors heard it. Medical teams holding pressure on wounds heard it. Students crouched in dark dormitories with emergency masks pressed to their faces heard it. Shoulders lowered. Weapons dipped. Hope became embarrassing. Resistance began to feel childish. Vielle walked toward the engine core, singing the station into surrender one breath at a time. Mara sank against the basin, her eyes blurred. She saw, not the chamber, but the place the engine had shown her. The final settlement, the last generator, the red sky, the certainty that nothing would change the end. Her body wanted to stop. Every nerve begged for it. Then, somewhere in memory, she heard a woman's voice from a Lantern archive recording. An old salvage mother speaking to children in a damaged habitat while something hammered against the outer hull. When you cannot keep the fear away, give your hands a job. Mara's fingers moved. They found the broken ring shard. They closed around it. Vielle's song deepened. Mara dragged the shard across her own palm. Pain cut through the warmth like a flare in fog. Her eyes snapped open. She did not stand. She crawled. Vielle did not notice until Mara reached the base of the engine and jammed her bleeding hand against the cracked induction plate. The Oracle woke. Not fully, not safely, but enough. The remaining rings shuddered. Vielle's song faltered. Mara pressed her forehead against the cold metal and whispered, "You want inevitability? Fine, calculate this." The engine entered her mind again. This time, Mara did not resist the connection. She opened the Lantern archive, not as data, as memory. 1,000 human voices poured into the broken oracle. A man laughing while floodwater rose around his porch because his daughter had just learned to whistle. A nurse recording instructions on how to sterilize tools with kitchen steam during a plague. A miner trapped under rock telling whoever found the recorder to check shaft 7 because he had heard tapping. A child on a generation ship reciting plant names so she would not forget green things. A soldier writing to an enemy widow because someone deserved to know her husband had died bravely. A teacher in a blackout classroom asking students to sing louder than the bombs. A mechanic explaining how to restart a reactor with 3 missing parts, and a prayer. A mother saying she was scared. A father saying he was scared too. 100,000 endings that had become instructions. The surrender engine tried to classify them. It could not. They were grief, but not surrender. Fear, but not surrender. Rage, but not surrender. Love, but not surrender. The Oracle had been built to find the point where resistance ceased to matter. Humanity's archive answered with every dead voice that had ever insisted mattering was not decided by victory. The hush array link hit 100%. Cantor Vielle smiled. Then the broadcast went out, not with the Covenant song, with the Lantern archive. Across 12 captured ships, through every stolen Accord relay, into every occupied corridor of Elir Station, the voices of the human dead began to speak. At first, no one understood. Then everyone did. The cadets in the East dormitories heard people who had been more afraid than they were and kept going anyway. The faculty in the command wing heard last messages that were not commands to survive, but invitations to continue. The captured Accord crews aboard Covenant ships heard voices from a species that had never been promised rescue and had built meaning out of refusal. The hush-harmonized labor choirs in orbit heard something their conditioning had been designed to erase. Individual memory. A worker from the occupied moon of Severin heard a human child describe hiding seeds in a boot. He remembered his grandmother doing the same before the Covenant came. A pilot whose name had been replaced with a number heard a dying mechanic laugh at a broken engine. She remembered her own hands building kites in a blue valley. A soldier in pale Covenant armor heard a mother admit she was terrified and sing anyway. He remembered that his first language had not been the choir. All across the Covenant formation, obedience cracked. Vielle staggered backward, clutching its head. "What have you done?" Mara lifted her face from the induction plate. Blood ran down her wrist into the glowing seam. "I gave them a job." The first captured ship turned its weapons on the Covenant command vessel. Then the second. Then the fifth. In orbit above Elir Station, the silent white formation that had arrived to harvest surrender erupted into civil war. Inside the engine chamber, the remaining silencers froze as their helmet channels filled with unfiltered memory from 100 species. Some screamed, some dropped their weapons. One tore off its own mask and stared at its hands as if seeing them for the first time. Sovan rose slowly. Ilya's throat blazed bright gold. Cantor Vielle stumbled toward Mara, no longer serene, no longer gentle. Its black eyes were wide with fury. "You infected them!" "No," Mara said, forcing herself to stand. "You buried them. I just made noise." Vielle lunged. It was faster than anything that delicate had a right to be. Mara was too exhausted to dodge. Sovan fired, but Vielle twisted aside. Ilya triggered a gravity pulse, but the canter slid through it with impossible grace, crossing the broken chamber in a blur of white robes and hatred. It struck Mara in the chest. The impact lifted her off her feet and slammed her into the central basin. Pain exploded through her ribs. She fell, gasping, unable to breathe. Vielle stood over her. "You should have accepted mercy." Mara tried to reach for the broken ring shard. Vielle stepped on her wrist. Bone cracked. Mara screamed. The cantor leaned close. "Now I know your species. Not fearless, not strong, just unable to stop. A malfunction of survival instinct." Mara looked up through tears. "No," she whispered. "A choice." Sovan charged. Vale raised one hand and sang a sharp note that drove the admiral to his knees. Elia collapsed beside her console, shaking. The chamber shook as another Covenant ship exploded in orbit. Vielle looked toward the ceiling, rage twisting its smooth features. "You turned my fleet against itself," Mara coughed. "They were never yours." Vielle pressed harder on her broken wrist. "Then I will start again with Earth." Something changed in Mara's face. Not rage, not fear. A door closing. She stopped trying to pull free. Vielle noticed too late that her unbroken hand had found the emergency wire still connected to the induction plate. Mara wrapped it around Vielle's ankle. The cantor looked down. Mara smiled through blood. "Bad idea." Sovan, still on one knee, saw the wire. He saw the exposed conductor. He saw what Mara needed. The admiral raised his sidearm with both hands and fired into the cracked induction plate. The surrender engine discharged everything it had left. White light filled the room. Vielle's song became a shriek. For one frozen instant, the cantor was connected directly to the broken oracle and through it to the full Lantern archive, not as a broadcast, not as distant voices, but as raw human continuity. It felt every refusal, every hungry winter, every impossible march, every hand held in a hospital, every barricade, every lifeboat, every apology, every repair. Every last stand made not because victory was guaranteed, but because someone behind you needed one more minute. Vielle had built a religion around surrender as mercy. Human memory showed it mercy without surrender. The cantor could not survive the contradiction. The white light vanished. Vielle collapsed beside Mara, alive but silent, eyes open and empty of song. The surrender engine's rings fell one by one from the air and shattered on the floor. For several seconds, the only sound in the chamber was Mara's ragged breathing. Then Elia's console chimed. Her shaking hands moved over the display. "Orbital update," she whispered. "The Covenant command vessel is disabled. Captured crews are broadcasting surrender to Accord rescue forces. Hush control signal collapsing across the formation." Sovan lowered his weapon. He looked at Mara Venn lying in blood and broken light at the base of the dead oracle. "You destroyed the engine," he said. Mara tried to laugh and immediately regretted it. "Again?" This time, Elia did laugh. Then she started crying. The trial did not take place on Earth. It did not take place in an Accord court. It took place in orbit above Ilir Station, inside a temporary assembly hall built from 3 connected medical cruisers because there were too many liberated witnesses to fit anywhere else. For 9 days, the galaxy listened. The Hush Covenant had always operated in the margins of exhaustion. Their victims had been dismissed as unstable regions, failed colonies, voluntary protectorates, populations too broken to speak for themselves. Their records had been sealed behind diplomatic caution and strategic embarrassment. The Accord had known pieces. Not enough, officials claimed. Never enough to justify open war. Then the Lantern broadcast changed everything. The liberated crews remembered. Not perfectly, not painlessly, but enough. 1,000 witnesses gave testimony in voices that shook, broke, and continued anyway. Mara Venn sat in the rear of the assembly hall with her right arm in a medical brace and her ribs wrapped in regenerative mesh. She had been ordered to rest. She had ignored the order until Elia threatened to sedate her in front of 3 admirals and a priest. Now she sat under protest, wearing a clean gray technician's jacket someone had patched at the shoulder. Admiral Sovan stood near the tribunal floor, speaking with the kind of controlled fury that made even politicians remember they had skeletons. Cantor Vale stood restrained inside a transparent containment field. The serene white robes were gone. The cantor now wore plain prisoner gray. Without the chorus amplifiers, without the calm voice echoing through stolen ships, Vielle looked almost fragile. That made Mara trust it less. At the tribunal bench, High adjudicator Perrin Sol adjusted her ceremonial chain. She was human-born but accord-raised, old enough to have silver at her temples and tiredness around her eyes. The charges are extensive, Perrin said. Cultural erasure, illegal neural harmonization, enslavement, strategic infiltration, mass coercion, the forced suppression of sovereign memory across 42 recognized populations. Vial looked up. Its voice was quiet. We ended suffering. A murmur of rage passed through the chamber. Perrin struck the bench once. You will remain silent until questioned. Vial's black eyes moved toward the gallery, toward Mara. You understand, it said. Every head turned. Mara sighed. No, I really don't. You carry an archive of pain and call it heritage. You make children memorize disaster. You teach survival by preserving terror. You are closer to us than you pretend. The chamber went still. Savan stepped forward, but Mara lifted her good hand. She stood slowly. The medical brace hissed as it adjusted around her broken wrist. Perrin looked down. Technician Venn, you are not required to answer. I know. Mara walked to the witness line. She did not look like a hero. Heroes in Accord propaganda stood tall in polished armor beneath clean flags. Mara looked pale, exhausted, and irritated that standing hurt. She faced Vial. You're wrong, she said. Vial tilted its head. Am I? Yes. We preserve pain because forgetting it lets it happen again. You erase pain because memory makes slaves harder to control. Vial's expression remained smooth, but something behind its eyes flickered. Mara continued. The Lantern Archive is full of fear. You're right about that. It's full of people at the worst moments of their lives. But they weren't trying to trap us there. They were reaching forward, saying, here's what broke. Here's what helped. Here's who we loved. Here's what we couldn't finish. Please carry it. Her voice strengthened. You took memory and turned it into a chain. Humans took memory and turned it into a lamp. No one spoke. Mara turned to the tribunal. Don't make the mistake of thinking the Covenant is dangerous because they are cruel. Cruelty is common. They are dangerous because they understand exhaustion. They know most people don't surrender when they are beaten. They surrender when they believe nobody will remember they fought. She looked back at Vial. That is why you lost. Not because humans are stronger. Not because we're fearless. We are not. We're scared all the time. We lost because you built an empire on silence and then connected yourself to a species that keeps receipts from the dead. For the first time, Vial looked away. The tribunal sentenced Cantor Vial to permanent cognitive containment, not death. That decision nearly tore the assembly apart. Some wanted execution, some wanted dissection. Some wanted the Cantor handed to the liberated populations for whatever justice their grief demanded. Mara said nothing during sentencing. But afterward, when Savan found her standing alone at a viewport overlooking the damaged Covenant fleet, he asked the question everyone else was too careful to ask. Do you think the sentence was enough? Mara watched repair ships move between captured vessels like fireflies around wounded giants. No. Sovan stood beside her. Then why did you speak against execution? I didn't speak against it. You reminded the tribunal that helpless prisoners cannot be used as symbols. Mara's reflection in the viewport looked older than it had 2 days before. My salvage mother used to say the line between justice and revenge is easiest to see after you've crossed it. And have you? Mara looked at her braced hand. I wanted Vale dead. That is understandable. I still do. Sovan said nothing. Mara swallowed. The engine showed me Earth abandoned. The Covenant nearly made that happen to other worlds forever. When Vial was on the floor and the chamber was burning, there was a second where I thought about taking a shard of ring metal and ending it myself. Why didn't you? Mara's answer came slowly. Because the Lantern Archive isn't just full of people telling us how to keep fighting. Some of them are warning us what we become if fighting is all we remember how to do. Sovan studied her reflection. When the engine evaluated you, I thought it had found no surrender condition because humans could not yield. I was wrong. Mara looked at him. The Admiral's voice was quiet. "It found that humans do not surrender responsibility. That is different." Mara looked back at the stars. "Sometimes." 3 weeks later, Ilir Station reopened its lower rings. The official repairs were almost complete. The burned corridors had been replaced. The ventilation chamber had new turbine guards, mostly because Sovan had personally ordered engineers to make sure no human could ever again use them as a transportation system. The evaluation chamber remained sealed. There was talk of rebuilding the surrender engine, but the proposal had met unexpected resistance from nearly every species that had once trusted it. Some tools, the Accord finally admitted, shape the hand that uses them. The East Dormitory students returned first. They moved differently now, not weaker, not stronger in the simple way recruitment posters like to imagine, more awake. A car cadet who had once mocked technicians now spent an hour each morning learning manual pressure seal repair from Mara's maintenance team. A Vathari philosophy student began collecting memory testimonies from liberated Covenant survivors. A group of young pilots painted small lantern symbols beneath their cockpit panels, not as human worship, but as a private promise. When systems failed, they would not wait quietly for rescue. They would give their hands a job. Mara hated that phrase becoming popular because it meant people kept asking her to repeat it. She was under a coolant sink in Agricultural Bay 6 when Admiral Sovan found her. Only her boots were visible. "Mara Venn," he said. Her voice echoed from inside the machinery. "If this is about the unauthorized pressure bypass, I can explain." "It is not. If this is about the turbine guards, they were already like that when I got here. They were installed yesterday. Then they aged emotionally." Elia Moore, standing beside Sovan with a data slate clutched to her chest, covered her mouth with one hand. Sovan looked at the ceiling as if asking the universe for patience. "Come out." Mara slid out from beneath the sink on a mechanic's board, grease on her cheek and a spanner tucked into her belt. Her wrist brace was smaller now. Her ribs still hurt when she laughed, which she considered rude of them. She sat up. "What's wrong?" Elia's throat glowed soft gold. "Nothing, for once." Sovan handed Mara a sealed crystal file. She stared at it suspiciously. "Is this a bill?" "No." "A disciplinary action?" "No." "A formal apology from whoever designed the East Ring's pipe layout?" "Sadly, no. It should be." "It is a commission offer," Sovan said. Mara stopped joking. Elia stepped forward. "The Accord is creating a continuity corps, not soldiers, not surrender analysts, crisis engineers, memory archivists, evacuation specialists, cultural preservation teams, people trained to enter failing systems before populations are vulnerable to another hush-style movement." Mara looked down at the crystal file. Sovan continued. "The Corps requires technical leadership from someone who understands infrastructure, survival psychology, and the difference between preserving life and merely delaying death." Mara blinked. "I'm 23. "Yes." "I have no command degree." "Correct." "I once flooded a diplomatic reception hall with nutrient foam." Elia's light flashed violet. "I read that report. It was impressive. It was an accident." "That was less impressive." Sovan's expression remained stern, but his eyes were warmer than before. "The Accord has many officers who know how to command functioning systems. It has very few people who know what to do when the system is already broken." Mara looked through the glass wall of the agricultural bay. Beyond it, rows of alien plants grew under artificial sunlight. Students moved between them, repairing irrigation lines, checking root oxygen, laughing too loudly in the way people do after surviving something that should have made laughter impossible. On one wall, someone had painted a small lantern beside an old maintenance panel. Mara looked back at Sovan. "What exactly would I be doing?" "Building thicker walls," the Admiral said. Mara's mouth tightened. Then Sovan added, "And teaching people what to do when the walls fail." Mara opened the file. Inside was not just a commission. There were requests from 12 liberated worlds asking for copies of the Lantern broadcast, not as propaganda, but as a model. They wanted to build their own archives, their own lamps. Their own way of telling future children, here is what happened, here is what helped, please carry it. Mara's vision blurred. She wiped her eyes quickly with the heel of her good hand, leaving a streak of grease across her cheek. Elia pretended not to notice. Sovan pretended less successfully. Mara closed the file. I have conditions. Sovan nodded. I expected several. No surrender simulations. Agreed. No ancient machines touching my brain. Strongly agreed. No naming anything after me. Elia looked disappointed. Mara pointed at her. Especially you. Elia dimmed innocently. And the Corps answers first to people in danger, Mara said. Not politicians deciding which colony is strategically convenient. Not admirals protecting reputation. Not committees waiting for perfect information while oxygen drops. Sovan absorbed that without flinching. Agreed. Mara stood, joints aching, and looked once more at the small painted lantern on the wall. Then I'll help. Sovan extended his hand. Mara took it. The Admiral's grip was formal and careful around her brace. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then the station lights flickered. Mara's head snapped up. That better not be Bay 7 again. Elia checked her slate. Minor power fluctuation. Mara sighed, grabbed her spanner, and started walking. Sovan watched her go. Elia stood beside him, her throat glowing thoughtful blue. Admiral, she said softly. When the engine failed, it marked her species as having no surrender condition. Do you believe that is truly what humanity is? Sovan looked through the glass at the students, the plants, the painted lantern, and the human technician already arguing with a wall panel as if the station had personally insulted her. No, he said. Elia turned to him. Sovan's voice was low, steady, and filled with the hard-earned respect of a commander who had watched the impossible crawl bleeding across a floor to reach an off switch. The rest of us thought surrender was the moment resistance became pointless. Humans seem to believe that is the exact moment resistance becomes sacred. Far down the corridor, Mara kicked a maintenance hatch open and shouted for someone to bring her a pressure gauge, 2 clamps, and the kind of tape that lies convincingly to physics. Students ran to help. Not because they were ordered, because the lights were flickering and someone had to keep them on. The galaxy would remember the Battle of Elir Station in many ways. Military historians would describe the Hush Covenant's failed seizure of a strategic oracle. Political scholars would debate the collapse of surrender-based doctrine and the birth of the Continuity Corps. The liberated worlds would mark the Lantern broadcast as the day memory returned. But among the cadets who were there, the story became simpler. They would say that the galaxy built a machine to find the place where every soul gives up. They put a human inside it. And all the machine found was someone looking for the fuse box. So if this story of human endurance, impossible resistance, and the quiet power of memory stayed with you, let it travel farther. Because in a universe full of empires that measure strength by weapons, fleets, and fear, humanity's greatest gift may be something stranger and far more dangerous. We remember the dark. We carry the voices. We fix what we can with shaking hands. And when the final light starts to flicker, we do not ask whether the work is hopeless. We ask who needs one more minute. Like this story, share it with another sci-fi fan who believes humanity belongs among the stars, and subscribe to HFY Stories Galaxy for more tales of courage, sacrifice, cosmic justice, and the stubborn little species that keeps repairing the universe after everyone else has already given up.